Hello, this is Dr. Kurt Loveless at Yellow House Dental and Implant Center with another edition of our Whiteboard Wednesdays. Today I want to talk a little bit about an ailment that affects a lot of us, but we don't really realize that a lot of it has to do with our teeth, and that's what everybody calls TMJ, or what the proper name is TMD. So TMD is temporal mandibular dysfunction. It is a disease that has many components and many variations, but they all can be tied back to this joint that we have in our heads called the TMJ. The temporal mandibular joint is the joint between our jaw and our skull. Now if we look at a skull, a human skull, and I have one right here, you can see, if you look at this skull right here like this, you can kind of see the components that I've drawn here. So this is a human skull, and so I want to point out the features of the temporal mandibular joint. In the skull there is a depression called the glenoid fossa, and a little ridge up here called the articular eminence. The jaw articulates, the lower jaw articulates into that depression, and so the condyle of the mandible fits up inside. Between this condyle and that depression in the skull sits a pad of fiber cartilage called the articular disc. The articular disc allows this joint to not only slide forward and back, but hinge open and closed. So what I've drawn here on the board, this is the condyle of the lower jaw, the mandible. There's the glenoid fossa, and that little green disc right there is the articular disc. So when someone says, hey, my jaw is popping, here's the mechanics of how that happens. This articular disc has some elastic fibers on the back, and then has a muscle called the lateral pterygoid muscle that is attached to the disc and to the head of the condyle. The purpose of the lateral pterygoid is to open your jaw. When it contracts, it pulls the jaw forward and it slides down this articular eminence to a position over here. So the temporomandibular joint is both a hinge and it's a slide. So we call this the TMJ a translatory joint because it has two components of movement. So it hinges open and it slides forward. So where the popping jaw comes from is this articular disc becomes partially dislocated. And so it's sitting off of the condyle, and so when you begin to open and it begins to slide forward, it pops back into place. And that can be in the form of a click, or it can be a very loud pop. I've seen people that, you can hear them across the room pop their jaws, and it's because this disc is sliding in and out of place. So where this becomes part of the symptoms of TMD is the muscles that are controlling this joint. If they are working overtime, they go into spasm, and when they go into spasm, it's a Charlie horse, just like a Charlie horse in your leg. You know when you get a cramp when you're running, it's a Charlie horse in your leg, it hurts like the dickens, and you're reaching down and rubbing it out. Well, when you get a Charlie horse of the temporalis muscle or the lateral pterygoid or something like that, it's in your head, it's on your head, you think, hey, I've got a headache. Many people say, gee, I got a tension headache. Well, they're rubbing the belly of the temporalis muscle right here, and that's one of the positioning muscles of the jaw, and it's a very common muscle to go into spasm. So the pain that's associated with TMD a lot of times has to do with muscle spasms. So how do we treat this? We treat this by putting the jaw in a position where the muscles can relax. You do that with an oral appliance usually. Sometimes we can use some medications. Sometimes you can use heat, a rice bag or something like that. But normally what we have to do is get the jaw into a relaxed position so that those muscles can relax and heal. Then the pain goes away. So this is kind of an overview of the temporomandibular joint and the disease that we call temporomandibular dysfunction. So we will have future Whiteboard Wednesdays. We'll talk more in depth about some of the symptoms of TMD. Next month we'll have a session where Corey, our hygienist, is going to talk about orthodontics in taking care of your teeth while you're in ortho. So this is another edition of Whiteboard Wednesday.